Okay, great. So welcome to Finders, which is LGD Directories everywhere. This presentation is available on GitHub. It's a Reveal.js presentation. My name's Joachim. I'm a freelance Drupal developer. I've been doing Drupal since, like the Drupal 6 days, about the same as was it Andy who was saying he's been around since Drupal 6. I'm Joachim on Drupal.org and on Drupal Slack, and I'm also Joachim on the Drupal community Mastodon. So, to quickly recap, what are LGD directories? They're a way of presenting content as a list that can be searched, and Eeks has done some of the work for me already in his presentation earlier, showing examples of what directories can do. And one of the key aspects of directories is that content editors can build new lists as well as creating list items. They can create new lists. They're all content. The lists are content, and the items that go in the list are content as well. So I asked on LGD Slack for some examples of directories, and you will have seen some already this morning. We can have service directories. This is one from Hammersmith and Fulham. And we see the facets that were talked about in Andy's session earlier. We've got facets by age group and area. We've got directories with a map, again, like we saw in Andy's presentation. Here we've got Woking car parks, where I've been told that there's some kind of live status that pulls in data sort of reasonably recently. Luton's recycling centres, where we see a map again. And Climate Action Oxfordshire, with quite a big list of searchable facets. So these are just some examples of the wide variety of things that directories can do. And the directories system is two node types that work together. We have the channel node, which is the actual node that you're looking at when you see the list and the map. And then we have the entry nodes, which are the items that you see in the list. So the whole thing you can think of as one system made up of two node types. And with directories, you can expand this pattern. You can have more node types, which are channels. The channels, remember, are the things that show lists. And you can have more node types, which are entries. So you can expand what you do with them. So you can use different node types for different kinds of output or different kinds of behavior. And that's done, if I remember correctly, fairly simply by adding the fields that control the relationships between channel and entry, by adding that to further node types. So, Finders is an abstraction of the LGD directories concept. It uses much of the same architecture, but it makes this pattern repeatable. With LGD directories, there is just the directory system, and we can have different channel types and different entry types, but it is all one system. With Finders, we can have several different systems that are completely separate from each other. So over here, we can have channel types A and B that work with entry types A and B, and a completely separate system, which is channel types C and D and entry types C and D. And these are different things that behave differently. And once we have two systems, we can make them work differently, like I say. And the first use case we've got for Finders is events, where as well as just searching on terms and facets, we can also work with the dates. So I'm going to talk more about the architecture now.
Is your video on?
Should it be?
Yeah, just so people can see on Zoom, can see your face as your. Sorry, just had a request.
Let's see. So I briefly mentioned LGD directories working with fields. Excuse me. LGD directories knows that things work together by means of which node types have the right reference field on them. With finders, we have something different. We have a config entity, which is what we actually call the finder, and that is powered by a plugin that provides the behavior. So the config entity holds the configuration for the plugin, and it also holds the data of which bundles are involved. And then the plugin is what supplies the behavior of the finder, which is then customizable. So when you create a finder config entity, you select the finder type plugin and you select the bundle entities that are involved. And then this automatically creates a whole bunch of config that you, well, not necessarily config, a whole bunch of things that you need for the finder to work. So we have the channel reference field, which is what sorry, brain blank. We have the channel reference field, the channel item types. We have fields for the title sorting and the view field. So these will be familiar from people who've gone into the innards of LGD directories. There is a field on the channel which says which entity types are entries in this channel. And then there is a field on the entry types that says which channels this entry is in. So when you create a new list, a new channel, you say what can go in this, what kinds of things can go in this, and then when you create an entry, you select which, for example, if it's an event at a library, you select which channel, so you select which libraries it is in. Familiar from LGD directories, there's a title sort field, and then new to finders is a view field that lets you customize the actual view that we're using to show. So in LGD directories, if I remember correctly, the view field is hard-coded. Here, it is something that you can swap out. And then we create a search index and the view of search index items. So unlike LGD directories, which creates a bunch of these things on install, this is happening when you create the finder config entity. So you create your first finder config entity, you'll get these. If you create a second finder config entity, it'll make the ones it needs for the second config entity. So the same thing in diagram format. As an admin, you need to create your channel type and your entry type. That's the light green, that's admin created config. Then when you create your finder, you get the view and the search index, which are config that's created by the finders module. And lastly, the various fields, they're not config, they are defined as code fields, as bundle fields, which is one of the things that allows the plugin to customize them more easily. So that's the basic system. Is that time remaining or time I've used?
Remaining.
Okay, I'm going to have a lot of time for questions.
Great.
Should I slow down? Should I take interim questions? No, okay. So that was the basic finder system. Now we can build on top of it. So the first extension is the event system. So there's a second contrib module called Finders Events, which provides a finder type plugin. So if you remember, your finder is a config entity plus some plugin configuration. So the events finder type plugin, in addition to what we saw so far, provides a recurring date field and two extra views that you can show in your channel, the list view and the calendar view. So a word on recurring date fields. We're using the date recur module. There is also smart date out there in the ecosystem, which is what Drupal CMS has opted to use. I was talking to Eeks earlier this morning, who said he's got a project up his sleeve for a recurring date module. It is a slightly fragmented ecosystem at the moment, unfortunately. Recurring date, Eeks will be able to say more than I can about why recurring date was the best choice. But it is basically to do with how it stores the data. And it's the one that was already, I think is the one that already used in LGD events. Can someone confirm? Yeah. So yeah, out of interest of staying compatible with LGD events, we went for recurring date field. So, big list of things that an events finder creates for you. Again, it defines the bundle fields, as with the basic finder, the channel reference, the channel item, the title sort. That's the same as with the basic finder. But on top of this, instead of just the one view field, we can have the plugin make two view fields for us, one for the list, one for the calendar. Finally, the search index and the view of the search index items. Again, now instead of just the one view, we get the list view and the calendar view. So I was about to say something about, yes. Andy mentioned in his presentation this morning about dates API, search API date recur, which is a module I wrote as part of my work on this. And that allows a recurring date to put multiple instances of the same node into the search index, one for each occurrence. And that is how, when we allow search API, when you filter, say, to February, you'll get the occurrence of a repeating event. You'll get the one that's in February showing up. Again, it's something, there were possibly different ways of slicing it. One option might have been to actually create multiple nodes for a recurring event. I think we considered that and decided it was...
I still have Drupal 7, so does this. It has 800,000 nodes.
Yes. We decided that was probably not the way to go. And so, yeah, as I've got plenty of time, I'll say a bit more about this. What it does is at the, I don't know how much into depth I need to go about Search API, but when Search API indexes, instead of just putting one index item in for that node, it puts multiple, and you can configure it to how far into the future you want it to do that. So it will see your recurring node, your recurring event node, which has a recurring date that says this is every month on the first of the month or first Saturday of the month, and it will spin out the occurrences of that for, I think the default is the next 2 years, and each of those is an item in the index. So as far as Search API is considered, there are actually 24 of this in the index, each one with one date. And the module in question has been in use on Brighton, isn't it? Yep. We were just discussing now that we can probably make a stable 1.0 release. Yeah. So the same diagram, but now the events flavor. We've got the channel types field, so pointing to so when you select which entry types are in a channel. On the entry node, you select which channel it's in. On the entry node, you can give it a special sort title. And now, because this is event, you get your recurring date field. And you get two views made for you. And instead of just the one view field, you get two, one for the list, one for the calendar. I mean, one's called list, one's called calendar, but you could bend and break that and select any old view you wanted. The next extension to this is facets. This is implemented as a separate module, but it's included as a submodule in Finders. And with that enabled, you have the option to turn facets on a per finder basis. So when you create your finder, there is with this module enabled, there is an option in your finder to enable facets for it. Currently, this works with facets 2 because at the time I was working on it, facets 3 wasn't yet stable. Facets 2 was what was being used in LGD. So it creates a config facet and then a block of the facet. Now, as Andy showed this morning, with facets 3, you don't actually need the facet config entity, and you don't need the block that shows that facet because it's all done in views. Fun fact, when you use facets 3 with your view and you add a filter for your facet, you add a facet filter into your view, I think it's when the view runs, it goes away and instantiates a facet config entity on the fly to then function with. But yeah, so it is. It can also work with facets 3. I think I've tried it with facets 3. I think, Andy, have you tried this with facets 3? Not yet. I know I started looking at it with facets 3, and basically facets 3 is just, it's the same but without, you just ignore these.
Hang on, Andy. If you're going to talk, let's use the mic. Sorry. Hang on 1 second. Pass the mic.
Sorry, it's my fault for putting Andy on the spot.
Okay. Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me now. So facets 3 is forward compatible with facets 2. So when you upgrade to facets 3, if you've got existing facet blocks, those will be still enabled, and so it all should still work. For the exposed views filters, you need to enable a module. There's a submodule called facet exposed filters, and once that's enabled, that's what allows you then to put the facets into views. And also, as I mentioned earlier, it's recommended you pair it with the better exposed filters module, and that's what lets you have the checkboxes. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. So onto some screenshots. This is when you create an event channel. This is these are some of the fields that I mentioned. That's where you pick which node types can function as entries for this channel. And then that's the views reference fields where you get to pick the event list view and the event calendar view. And then if you have facets enabled, you get to pick the facets that work in this channel. And then you create an event item. This is very much looks the same as LGD directories. You get to pick the channels, you get to pick the primary channel, and then the other channels. I actually just saw the other week an interesting looking contrib module called something like primary reference field, which provides, it's a reference field type, it's a custom field type that stores, it basically does this. It stores a multi-valued reference, but it says that one of them is the primary, and that's stored as in the database as an extra column to mark that one as the primary. And I did wonder whether we should switch to using that before we get to finders. Now would be the time. I see a shaking head. We can talk about that later. Yeah, I was wondering about it. I filed an issue to think about it. I think I'm on the no side as well at the moment. I'd be interested to talk about your reasons for saying no. Who said that? Graham. So, and then this is what it looks like when it's saved. This is our channel node, which is a library. We have the date facets shown as months on the left, and here we've got the one event which is recurring once a month. And so if I filter on the left here, it'll filter down to just one of these. And then lower down, we've got the calendar view. Now, when Andy was talking about splitting the map and the list into two separate tabs, I did start to think maybe we should do that with the list and the calendar, because so far one thing I found when you're looking at a channel node with these two on is you either got the calendar at the top, and then there's you need to know the list exists. There's a discoverability issue, or you've got the list at the top and it's really long, and you need to know that the calendar exists. So we might look at what Andy's done to have the map and the list in two different places, and do the same thing with the list and the calendar. So that's a rough overview of the state of Finders now. What next? We need to get Finders to a 1.0 release. There are some open issues or issues that are sort of needs work, needs review on the Finders module. There's, I think, maybe 1 or 2 on Finders events. So that's a certain amount of work there. The next thing is, I forgot to put LGD events in that list. LGD events working on top of Finders events. And that also, Rupert's done a fair bit of work on that, and that also has a few issues open at the moment to get that to a stable release. So that would be LGD events 4, which would be a rebuild on top of Finders events and Finders. Then the further ahead in the roadmap would be rebuilding LGD directories to work on top of Finders. So it would be basically Finders with a little sprinkling of LGD customization. And beyond that would be more custom Finder types for other things that we want to work like LGD directories do at the moment. So blogs, news, anywhere where there's a use case for, back what I said at the beginning, content editors creating lists, searchable lists of stuff. So I saw some confused faces when I started mentioning about what works on top of what. So a quick dependency chart. We've got Finders. We've got LGD directories that would work on top of Finders. We've got Finders events that extends Finders, and then LGD events that goes on top of Finders events. Technically, LGD core also goes there, but it's a topology problem there. So the Drupal org projects that are involved in this, there's Finders and Finders events. Then there's the module I was talking about earlier, recurring dates field search API. So basically, this is the glue between search API and the date recur field type. This is the thing I mentioned earlier that puts multiple copies into the search index. Then Finders itself has some dependencies. It uses search API, obviously. And as I mentioned earlier, the views reference fields, we are just using the views reference module. I think there's maybe at least 2 different views reference modules out there. We use the one that lets you pick which display you want as well as the view. And I think it also has an option for filtering which things we actually show as available. And then Finders events depends on date recur. And we've also made it depend on the extra, I don't know why they've made it a separate module, but there's an extra module that provides some various widgets for the date recur field. Basically, because there's an awful lot of things you can capture in the format for recurring dates, and the sticking point is actually the UI of how you make it easy for users to enter the various combinations. And there are some widgets that are more geared to one type of recurring, one sort of type of recurring date. And some widgets are better geared for doing exceptions. Some widgets are better geared for doing things like third Saturday of the month or whatever. And then finally, the calendar view module that we're using for the calendar view. So I'd like to say thank you to Chicken, who I've been worked for much of the Finders work, and also LocalGov and Essex and Hammersmith and Fulham, who've been involved in this early work on Finders. And special thanks to Eeks, because Much of the architecture of Finders is based on LGD Directories, which Eeks is one of the major author of that. So a lot of how Finders is structured and how it works is thanks to Eeks. And finally, hire me. I'm available for work. Justine from Chicken did me a lovely quote. So yeah, I'm freelance. I'm available for contract, ad hoc, whatever. Yes.
Thank you very much, Joachim. I now sort of understand what Finders is, which is great. Thank you. A lot of that, brilliant. That was great. Thank you for the really clear slides. So questions as we watch hands fly in the air. We've got one from Finn. Questions from Zoomies. Does anybody want to put their hand up? I'm going to just go and change my view just so I can see anybody. Okay, gallery. Anybody on Zoom want to ask a question? Zoomies are very quiet today. Are they all gone to sleep? Do you think? Should we check if they're still there?
Scared them off.
Anyone on Zoom want to say hi? Just shy? Joe's saying shy. Hi from Nick. Colin. Colin's here. They're waking up. Lee saying hi. Zeki's still here. Hi from Steve and Doncaster. Great. Okay. Well, they are still here.
But those are statements rather than questions.
That is no questions I can see. Okay. So we'll go to the room. I think Finn's hand shot up. Is that correct? I did notice. I did notice. Hang on a second. I'll bring you the mic.
Thank you very much. Amazing, Joachim. Thank you. Super exciting to see where we've got to. I have not had a chance to dive into Finders yet because I know how big it is, and we've got so much other stuff going on. So apologies, for not giving it the attention it deserves. And yeah, we need to get it to a stable release. You kind of mentioned the first things that LocalGov Drupal are going to build on, like events. The sort of elephant in the room is kind of, I guess, upgrades and migration from LGD events current to new events. Do you think we should go down that route? Do you think we should get to a point where we can release Finders events and people will have an automatic migration path from old events to Finders events? Or is that just going to be way too hard and we need to kind of just cut and say, there's too much technical debt there?
I can't remember how much. I did look into this, but I can't remember how deep I went. I don't think it's enormous, partly because we're using the same date field. The answer is I can't remember because I should have included this in the presentation. It's an oversight on my part. I think there might be an issue open about it, probably on the LGD events repository. And yeah, it is something I've looked into.
I mean, it's just something that's been constantly. We're like, bring Finders, bring Finders. I'm like, but we can't just drop it in.
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I can tell you that all the work I've done on it, everything I've thought about has been brain dumped onto an issue.
Yeah.
So the knowledge that at some point has been in my head is in an issue.
I mean, it's not, it's not, I guess, rocket science to do migration. So it's just a bit complicated, and especially where people have customized things a bit. Maybe Eeks has got some things to say about it, but I think it'd be great to get one thing done, like LocalGov events built on Finders events, built on Finders, and either have an upgrade path or not, and just declare that, and then follow that pattern with the other.
I think an upgrade, at least a basic upgrade path, is feasible, and then if there's customizations, that that would be on a case by case basis.
I'm just interested. How many councils are using events?
Greenwich, Newcastle, Brian, can you say?
Greenwich.
We've got at least three.
Greenwich, Brian, Newcastle. Okay. And you don't. How many actually have an archive of previous events? Anyone? Greenwich. Do you keep the previous events, or are you just showing upcoming events? Yeah.
So,
Newcastle? Oh, sorry.
yeah, Brighton has got them on there, but one of the things that my colleague Rosie wrote was a bit of events to delete or archive out the older events because they do fill up the system.
Can someone have a look on the LGD events issue queue for an issue about upgrades?
Because I was just being really pragmatic about this. I was thinking there aren't actually that many events that actually need migrating, because there aren't so many councils using events, and they're only showing the stuff that's in the future, and all the stuff that's past we don't need to migrate anyway.
So maybe for events specifically, there isn't a need or a massive need for data migration between old and new entity types, essentially, but maybe when we get to other directories and things that,
there's
blogs and news and stuff.
There'd be some migration involved for LGD directories. There'd be things like fields that change name, and the facet, it's a different facet entity type. So it would be data migration, but it would not be complex data migration.
One more follow up to that then. Can the two, because they are different entity types, entity names, field, the two can coexist, right? We can have LocalGov Directories, LocalGov events as is now, and then finders events. And
you can have LGD Directories 3 and finders events together. They won't clash.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Yeah. So this is just a little follow on, which is the pattern with events right now. I mean, obviously Brighton is different because we do have event channels, but most councils are, the default LGD3 is just one single events calendar. So my question would be, what is the intention for that single calendar? Would it carry forward, or because finders is obviously based on setting up channel types, or would the option be just to simply set up a everything channel?
I can't remember. I think that has been discussed. I mean, ultimately, you could create a view of all the, you could replicate that view quite easily. As for a channel that's everything, I don't know. I don't, that might be possible in theory.
Yeah, I mean, it's just some ideas. I point this out because one of the things that we found is trying to get the facets working with a generic views page causes quite a few issues. And, generally you probably wouldn't want it on the all ones anyway. So just thinking through how that might occur, because that's possibly one of the issues that's going to be in the upgrade, that all events are currently in a global events calendar. Cool.
As the mic goes past, I will say this is the biggest bonus for moving to events to finders is you will be able to have channels, so you can have events in your libraries, and you can have sports events and things like that, and it will just make it much smoother and nicer and present them in different places. So this is why you want it.